Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're exploring a really fundamental assumption about the modern world. Specifically, the air inside the buildings where we spend most of our lives.
Yeah.
Our offices, banks, government buildings.
That's right. And we're diving into a stack of source material that makes this a really astonishing claim.
It really is. The thesis is that the modern high-rise, the whole architectural model, is fundamentally flawed.
And not because of some modern shortcut. The mistake, they claim, is a century old.
We're talking about what the sources call Fully Sealed Recirculation Buildings, FSRBs.
Yeah, these huge glass and steel towers that, make up our skylines. The claim is that the system we used to manage the air inside was based on premises so wrong that ended up prioritizing just convenience over our actual health.
And the consequences are not theoretical. We're talking about a claimed price of chronic, low-level toxin exposure.
Things like immune collapse, fragmented sleep, long-term inflammation.
So our mission today is to trace that historical chain of errors, to figure out how we got here.
And to do that, we have to start where it all began. Late 19th century New York.
Right.
I mean, you have to picture it. These new skyscrapers are going up 20, 30 stories high. They're an absolute marvel.
A completely new kind of structure.
And it gave humanity a problem it had never, ever faced before. For the first time, we were building workspaces that couldn't just, open a window for fresh air.
So you have this new physical limit. You can't rely on the outside atmosphere anymore. And crucially, you have the tragedy of ignorance.
Exactly. The architects, the engineers, they just didn't know what they didn't know.
The danger was microscopic.
Completely. No one had any concept of volatile organic compounds, or VOCs. The idea that gases coming off of materials could be carcinogenic, it wasn't even on their radar.
And they certainly didn't know about aerosols carrying viruses or that ultrafine dust, PM 0.1, could actually be lethal.
All they knew, from an operational standpoint, was that it gets hot inside, and if you can't open the windows, you have to push air in somehow.
And that one simple need led to the single foundational error that built our modern world.
It was an engineering decision that was simple, it was expedient, and it was, as our sources argue, utterly disastrous.
The belief that just using a fan to blow air around.
It's the same thing as ventilation. They thought moving air meant cleaning air.
So they confused airflow with air quality. And look, that sounds like a simple mistake, maybe even a forgivable one, given the tech they had. But if that single belief got baked into the blueprint of every major city built since 1900, it becomes, a civilization-level problem.
It absolutely does. And that's our jump into part one, this huge blind spot of treating air like it's a non-toxic material.
Like it's just bare.
Right. In the 1870s, doctors knew that stuffy air makes people feel poorly, but they had zero ability to analyze what was actually in the air. They couldn't tell the difference between stale air and chemically contaminated air.
So the solution they came up with was based entirely on, perception, not science.
Exactly. If the air was moving and didn't smell bad, they figured it was good. If you can't measure toxicity, you can't design a building to protect against it.
And that inability to measure, that shaped everything.
It governed the entire mindset of engineers building these high-rises and banks from, say, 1870 to 1930. The whole design was ruled by three specific and really flawed assumptions.
Okay, let's hear them, because I have a feeling they're still with us today.
First one, moving the air is ventilation. Simple as that.
Okay.
Second, if the room is not physically stuffy, then it is safe.
Again, based on just feeling.
And the third one is, honestly, it's terrifying. The standard for safety was this. If people don't collapse immediately or, vomit, there's no problem.
Wow. So it was an immediate acute collapse test.
Applied to long-term architectural design, yes.
That is horrifyingly basic. But I have to ask, was there really no one pushing back on this? As these buildings got more common, didn't doctors start noticing patterns, people getting sick?
That's a great question. And they did see patterns. They had vague names for it, like office fatigue or later sick building syndrome.
Right.
But the link wasn't scientifically proven for decades. And the reason why is that the exposures were chronic. They were low level. And this is how we connect that historical blindness to the 21st century cost.
Okay, let's get specific. How does a faulty 19th century engineering choice lead to, say, fragmented sleep today?
It all comes back to those microscopic toxins we mentioned. Take PM 0.1.
The ultrafine particles.
Right. We're talking about particles less than 1/10 of a micron. They're so small, they just bypass all your body's natural defenses, your nasal hairs, mucus. They go straight into the deepest part of your lungs, the alveoli, where oxygen gets into your blood.
And what does that do?
The sources say that constant PM0.1 exposure creates chronic inflammation all throughout the body.
So it's not just a lung problem, it's a systemic stressor.
Exactly. And that systemic stress, that low-level inflammation, it impacts everything from your thinking, your cognitive function, to your sleep.
How does it affect sleep?
Well, when your immune system is constantly fighting this background noise of dust and VOCs, which are, often carcinogens from carpets and furniture, it never gets a chance to fully rest and repair. Your body is it's always on. It's running down.
That premature burden, that's the price we're paying for that old air is not toxic assumption.
That's the direct price.
Wow. Okay, so if the goal wasn't human safety, what was the driving force here? Because this brings us to part 2, and this is a genuine plot twist. HVAC was designed for inanimate objects.
It's the central irony of this whole story. Central heating, ventilation, and air conditioning, this system that's everywhere, it was not created for people. Its earliest forms were designed purely to preserve non-human materials.
So we're not talking about comfort, we're talking about preserving, capital, paper records.
Precisely. The first places you see these systems are where humidity and temperature control were absolutely mission critical. So think massive newspaper printing houses.
Yeah.
And crucially, bank file rooms and vaults. Places holding deeds, financial records, things that couldn't be allowed to degrade.
Let's really unpack that, the original mandate. Because the needs of paper are so different from the needs of a human being.
They're completely different. The engineers had 3 non-negotiable requirements for these systems.
Okay, requirement 1.
Humidity could not be too high. If it is, you get mold, you get mildew, it destroys the paper.
Makes sense. Requirement 2.
Humidity could not be too low. If the air is too dry, paper gets incredibly brittle. It just cracks and crumbles when you touch it.
And the third one is interesting because it's about chemistry. Preventing ink from, volatilizing?
Yes, exactly. The temperature had to be perfectly stable because if it fluctuated, the early chemically unstable inks they used could literally just turn into a gas and disappear off the page or bleed and become illegible.
They were worried about ink VOCs, not human ones.
They were only worried about ink volatility.
That contrast is it's so stark. A system designed to stop paper mold and bleeding ink gets directly applied to an office full of people.
And that is the second enduring civilization-level mistake. We took a system engineered for a non-living material and just applied it wholesale to us. We mistook climate regulation, keeping a room at 72 degrees and 50% humidity, for actual air safety.
But wait, if HVAC was for paper, surely someone, maybe in the 1950s when these buildings really took off, someone must have adapted the system for human lungs, right? Was there no push to add better filters or more fresh air?
There were some adaptations, sure, mostly to filter out visible dust, to keep the office furniture looking clean. But the structural error, the core idea, that remained.
Right.
Economics. The fundamental logic of recirculation is that it's way cheaper and easier to recondition used air than it is to constantly bring in fresh air and heat or cool it from scratch.
So the blueprint stuck.
The paper-centric blueprint stuck. And the sources are very clear on this. That error of substituting stability for safety, it persists to this day.
So we've got an architecture based on a false premise that a fan is ventilation and a conditioning system based on the needs of paper. So let's get to part 3, the toxic legacy. If they were ignorant about air chemistry back then, what are we trapped recirculating today?
The difference between 19th century air and 21st century indoor air is it's staggering. Back in the 1800s, indoor toxins were kind of predictable. You had coal soot, maybe some candle smoke.
Right.
So their fatal assumption that indoor air is basically the same as outdoor air, it was based on a world without modern synthetic chemistry.
An assumption that today is just catastrophically wrong.
Absolutely. The toxic density inside a modern building is exponentially greater. The sources point out that we have this toxic inventory that early architects couldn't even have dreamed of.
Right.
New paints, high-output photocopiers, laser printers, synthetic cleaning fluids, fire retardants in all the furniture, and now microplastics off-gassing from every single electronic device.
And all of these are releasing volatile organic compounds, VOCs.
Yes. And we have to remember, many VOCs are confirmed carcinogens. They're endocrine disruptors, When you smell that new carpet smell or that fresh cleaning product, you are often smelling VOCs.
And in a sealed building, they just accumulate. They have nowhere else to go.
The concentration just keeps rising. It moves from being a background smell to a chronic exposure risk.
And then you add the structural flaw of the system itself, the return air system, that makes sure everybody gets a dose.
This is where that engineering shortcut becomes truly dangerous. To be energy efficient, they design the system to suck air out of every room.
The return air.
Right. And then it mixes all that air together in a central duct to be filtered, cooled, and then sent right back out.
And they had no idea that this mechanism would combine every single toxin from every single person in the building.
None. They didn't know they were building a massive mechanical blender. The return air system takes localized contamination. It could be dust from someone's clothes or aerosols from a sneeze on the 10th floor.
Or the chemicals a janitor is using in the basement.
And it mixes it all into one single concentrated air supply for everyone.
So that's the pot of poisonous soup the sources talk about, that blending process.
It's the perfect description. The system, designed for cost efficiency, ensures that every single person is exposed to the average, worst-case accumulated waste of the entire building.
And we're using this 19th century model in a 21st century world that is filled with hundreds of times more synthetic junk.
The concentration risk is just immense.
It really makes you rethink every time you've walked into a big corporate headquarters and felt that immediate brain fog or fatigue. It's not just the bad lighting.
It could be a chemical cocktail being delivered right to your desk. That's the critical takeaway here. The FSRB model promises comfort, but what it delivers is pervasive, long-term exposure to things that were totally unknown when the system was invented.
Okay, let's synthesize this for everyone listening. We've traced a pretty clear line here of 3 linked historical errors that created buildings we work in.
Yes, the failure is threefold. First, the conceptual error, confusing a fan with actual ventilation.
Mistaking air movement for fresh air.
Second, the scientific error, treating air like it's a non-toxic, simple material in the design process.
And third,
the engineering error, taking a system made for paper, for climate control, and basically mislabeling it as a human air safety system.
And it's important to say these weren't malicious acts. They were shortcuts. They were born out of expedience and just complete ignorance of microscopic chemistry.
The challenge for us now is that we aren't ignorant anymore. We have the knowledge, and yet the vast majority of our buildings still run on those original flawed premises.
Recirculating used air is still cheaper.
It's an energy-saving technique that assumes air quality isn't a real issue.
Which raises a really powerful and kind of unsettling final thought for our listener to consider. If the entire model we use was born out of complete ignorance of toxins we can now measure, like VOCs and PM 0.1, what are we still blind to today?
Right. What unknown toxins, what new consequences of this universal recirculation are we missing?
Think about all the new materials, new chemicals, new plastics, the way viruses evolve.
What new unmeasurable ingredient is being constantly concentrated and served up in that same closed loop right now? The mistake of the 19th century was operating without a full chemical picture. The question for today is, are we so sure we have the full picture now? And what price is our comfort really exacting from our long-term health?
Air 8-free maze purifier. The world's first single-pass purifier. Combining ionization, electrostatics, and airflow maze. The machine replaces humans. To absorb and destroy every toxin. Air enters the ion zone. Viruses and dust gain negative charge. They pass electrostatic filters. Then enter the toxbox maze. Aerosols dry on electrode walls, breaking down into CO2 and water. Inside the maze, air twists and strikes over 60 times. Each turn ends a toxin's life. Billions of particles in 0.1 second are fully purified. It releases Earth's purest air. The superheaven air quality. 8-free, dust-free, germ-free, toxin-free. Smoke-free, odor-free, heavy metal-free. Microplastic-free, aerosol-free. Not just an air machine. The only key to lifespan freedom. U.S. Patent No. 8268058B2.